So this evening, I would like to speak a little bit about kiruv. And it is actually very appropriate for this week's Parshas Vayikra, and really all of Sefer Vayikra, namely because the central theme of the entire Sefer is dealing with the korbanos, with the offerings. The sacrificial offerings, just for clarity's sake, in Hebrew, an offering is called a korban, which has the shorish of karav, close, which is the same shorish, the same root as kiruv, which means bringing close. But when we look, let's just understand what the concept of these korbanos, what was their function, ultimately? When somebody would bring an animal offering in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple, what was the purpose of that? He's bringing a korban. Well, the word itself seems to suggest its function. He's bringing a korban because he is trying to connect, become close with Hashem. The korbanos were a way that the Jewish people, when the Beis HaMikdash, when the temple was standing, were able to facilitate a closer relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It was a way of, let's call it, reaching out. It was the first form of Jewish outreach, dating all the way back to Har HaBayis, the days of the temple. But in this week's Parsha, there's a Ramban which I think sheds some light on a new idea, dealing with this idea of coming close, this idea of kiruv. And the Ramban says, regarding the offering which one would bring if he had done a chet, an avera, a shogeg, accidentally, not knowingly, the Ramban says that the purpose of this is because, when a person commits a sin, a person does an avera, this has an effect on the person's neshama. And he says, the avonos yolidu ganai benefesh. They bring about, they give birth, so to speak, to some kind of ganai, something shameful to the person's nefesh, to the person's soul. The hey mumba, and they become a blemish on that. When a person does a sinful act, it's not simply that the act is committed and life goes on. Ultimately, we should move forward and try to improve ourselves, but the person's nefesh becomes blemished. And now he needs to do something about that. And that's what these korbanos, some of them, stand to do. Their function is to cleanse one's nefesh. And ultimately, because one would not be able to greet his creator with schmutz all over his nefesh, with a dirty nefesh, so to speak. So we see here something interesting. That the function of the korban was not only to connect with Hashem, but it was also, it wasn't only moving in an outward direction, so to speak. It was also going in just with the person himself, in his nefesh, his neshama, his soul. Just as the korban stands to do outreach, there's also this idea of doing inreach, where the person himself, forgetting anybody else or anything out there, he just has to make himself better, to improve himself in order that he can ultimately facilitate, that he can ultimately be, fitting to now go and become karov to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, become closer to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. This idea, I think we could say, is quite applicable, even dealing not simply just between ourselves and God, with ourselves and Hashem, but also dealing with our fellow Jew and reaching out to people. Because just as we want to reach out to people, for whatever cause it may be, and kiruv is a term used today quite, well, let's just put it, it's a very popular term, and it referring to this idea of Jewish outreach. But we see there's another element to it. And perhaps there's even an aspect that should precede before we reach out to somebody else, right? But we should reach in. And in order to really influence the world around us, it all starts at home. If we want to make an impact and make the world into a better place, we have to really reflect on ourselves and make ourselves into the better people that we can be. And from there, we should be more effective in impacting the greater Jewish people as a whole. Thank you.